The royal palace slept under a blanket of cold mist, but one chamber remained alive with whispers. A boy, no older than 10, lay on a golden bed draped with velvet sheets. His crown sat crooked on his pale, sweating forehead, as if it weighed more than his fragile body could bear. Outside these walls, the kingdom celebrated him as their golden child, the heir who would rise to power stronger than any king before him. Poets sang of his brilliance, courtiers bowed low, and the royal gods pledged to protect his destiny with blood. But inside his chamber, nothing felt royal. Only the smell of sickness. Only fear. Only the truth no one dared speak. This boy was dying slowly, painfully, and far more horrifically than history ever recorded. And the worst part, someone inside this very palace wanted him to. From the moment of his birth, the prince was treated not as a child, but as a divine blessing. The king, fierce, aging, obsessed with legacy finale, had an heir who could continue his bloodline. He smothered the boy with luxury, gold toys, silk garments, feasts no child could finish. Everyone called the prince spoiled. Servants whispered that the boy never walked anywhere. He was carried. Tutors complained he refused to study unless bribed. Even Tikin's advisors rolled their eyes behind closed doors, saying, "A weak prince makes a weak kingdom." But beneath the lavish treatment was something darker. The boy was fragile. He caught colds easily. He tired after just a few steps. He often stared blankly, as if drifting in and out of a pain only he could feel. Doctors claimed he simply needed better food. Nurses said he needed more sleep. The king refused to accept anything could be wrong with him. No one dared tell the truth. The boy's body was deteriorating. His pale skin, his constant exhaustion, and his thin frame, these were signs of a disease no medicine in the palace could cure. Yet the king's pride would not allow weakness in his lineage. "Treat him with stronger methods," he ordered. "Use whatever it takes." Those words became the beginning of the prince's torment. It started with a fever, not an ordinary one, a fire that raged through his body as if trying to burn him from the inside. The boy shook violently under the covers, his breaths shallow and ragged. Every few minutes, he gasped for air as if the room were drowning him. The palace healers filled the room with herbs, incense, and bitter concoctions. They whispered prayers. They applied cold cloves. They forced foul potions down his throat. But nothing stopped the fever. Nothing eased the agony. At midnight, the royal physician entered, a stern man known for experimental cures that frightened even adults. "We'll bleed him," he declared. "The sickness must be drawn out." The prince cried weakly as they tied his arm and cut into his skin. Bowl after bowl filled with blood, his vision blurred. His lips trembled. When the king entered, he found his son nearly unconscious, his face drained of life. "What have you done?" he roared. But the physician bowed deeply. "This will save him, my king." The king nodded, desperate, afraid, blind. 4 nights, they repeated the torture. Bleeding, burning herbs, force-feeding potions, prayers turning to frantic commands. And still, the prince slipped further into darkness. The fever was no longer the threat. The treatments were killing him faster. One night, as the prince lay trembling, a cloaked elderly woman entered his chamber. She moved like a shadow, her eyes sharp, her hands steady. The servants called her the Black Widow, a healer with methods banned in most of the kingdom. The king summoned her secretly, believing she possessed ancient remedies. But others in the palace whispered she had her own agenda. She belonged to a faction that wanted the boy gone. The woman lifted a bottle of dark liquid and leaned close to the prince. "Drink," she whispered. Her voice was firm, commanding, almost hypnotic. The prince, Abedu, weak to resist. The concoction burned his throat. His stomach twisted violently. A metallic taste lingered on his tongue. The king watched from the corner of the room, his face tense. "Will this cure him?" he asked. The old woman lowered her eyes. "It will change everything." What she meant was never spoken out loud, but from that night on, the prince's health collapsed rapidly. His skin turned yellowish. His eyes sunk deeper into their sockets. Every movement caused him agony. Some servants claimed they heard the woman whisper to the physician in the hallway, "A kingdom is safer without a sickly king." Was it poison? A dangerous herb? A cure meant to harm rather than heal? No one dared ask. No one dared stop her. The palace had chosen silence over Truthonac that sealed the prince's fate. For weeks, the prince drifted between consciousness and delirium. He saw strange visions, shadows climbing the walls, flickering lights, the faces of people long dead. He sometimes cried out for his mother, sometimes whispered secrets he was too young to know. His body wasted away, his ribs pressed against his skin. His hands shook even at rest. He often clutched his chest as if something inside was squeezing the life out of him. While his mind suffered, the palace outside grew darker. Rumors spread that the king's council was already planning the future who would take the throne if the prince died. Each day, the king visited his son and forced a smile. "You will be strong again," he said. But behind that forced courage was terror. The king had built his future on this child. At night, when the palace was silent, the prince whispered to his caretaker, "Why does it hurt so much? I just want to sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I feel myself falling." The caretaker would brush his hair and say softly, "You're not falling, my prince. You're fighting." But even she knew the truth. He was losing. On the last night, the air in the prince's chamber felt unnaturally cold. A storm raged outside, thunder echoing through the walls like war drums. The prince struggled to breathe. Every breath rattled inside him like broken glass. Sweat poured down his face. His fingers clawed at the sheets. The king barged in, desperate and trembling. "My son, please, hold on." The woman in black stood in the shadows, holding another vial. "The last dose," she said calmly. But the prince's caretaker stepped forward. "No more. You're killing him." For the first time, the king hesitated. The prince reached weakly for his father's hand. "Father, I'm so tired." Those were his last clear words. Moments later, his eyes rolled back. His breathing slowed to a faint whisper. His small chest rose one last time and then fell still. The king collapsed to his knees. The palace went silent. But the official announcement would never mention the truth. They told the kingdom he died peacefully, that he passed in his sleep, that he felt no pain. But those who stood in that room knew better. He died terrified. He died in agony. He died betrayed, and the kingdom built monuments to honor a story that never happened. The morning after his death, servants wiped the sweat from the prince's skin and painted his face to look healthy. His pale lips were colored pink. His open eyes were gently shut. His thin, frail body was hidden under layers of silk. The king ordered the room sealed. All notes, medicines, blood-stained linens, and records were burned. "No one must know," he commanded. Rumor spread. Of course, some said the prince was poisoned. Some blamed the woman in black. Others whispered that the king's own pride killed him. The truth never reached the kingdom. History books wrote a cleaner version. A softer version, a lie. Months later, the king often wandered into the empty chamber at night. The candle still flickered, untouched since the day the prince died. On the bed where his son once lay, the king would sit in silence, staring at the pillow. Sometimes he heard the boy's cough. Sometimes he felt a small hand gripping his. Sometimes he smelled the bitter herbs. The healers avoided eye contact. The woman in black disappeared from the palace. The caretaker was dismissed in silence, but the king could never escape the truth. The prince didn't die of fate. He died because the palace was a battlefield one too cruel for a child to survive. And the official story written for history, it was nothing more than a beautifully decorated lie. Thanks for watching.